Hey, Matt, it's Preview Thursday. We're looking at the biggest stakes of the weekend. And, Matt, this could be a weekend where the Phillies lead the way.
Of course, you're talking about the Queen's Plate, the first race in the Canadian Triple Crown. And then we're going to go down to New York to talk about the Mother Goose and the UN at our favorite track, Monmouth Park.
Watch now on Horse Center. Welcome to another edition of Horse Center, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the terrific pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. How are you? Ready to do the show?
There we go, Matt. We are doing some preview shows this week and next week. Expect Thursday Horse Centers for the next 2 weeks. Matt, we have plenty to talk about today. We're going to be previewing some of the biggest races in North America. And we start north of the border. Big day of racing Saturday at beautiful Woodbine Racecourse. Topped, of course, by the most prestigious of all Canadian races. It's the Queen's Plate, Matt. 1.25 miles on their Tapeta track. And we have an interesting field and a full field, Matt. 16 horses. I think either way we look at this race or try to analyze this race, we're going to start with one of two races. Either the Woodbine Oaks or the Plate Trial would serve as the most key race for this year's Queen's Plate. Let's start with the Woodbine Oaks, Matt. Dixie Moon and Wonder Godot ran 1-2 all by them lonesome. They were all by themselves down the lane late, but Dixie Moon held off Wonder Godot in the Woodbine Oaks.
Yeah, and like you said, the Queen's Plate, 16 horses in the field, and it is such an interesting mix of horses. The restricted, the Canadian bred nature of that race just gives you a bunch of horses that coming from all over the place with so many different angles in their post positions. But yeah, it was the Woodbine Oaks and those two horses. The Phillies have done well in the Queen's Plate historically. 36 times the Phillies have won the race, and that includes last year, Brian, when Holy Helena won the race, coming out of a victory in the Woodbine Oaks.
That's right, Matt, and we saw two very good candidates listed as the second and third choice. Let's start with Wonder Godot. Wonder Godot was an impressive two-time stakes winner at 2 last year. She's actually 0 for 6 this year. It sounds bad, but 5 of those 6 losses were by less than a length. She's finished no worse than third. She's finished second 4 times this year. She ran a very big Kentucky Oaks to give Monomoy Girl everything she wanted. Now she's back on the Tapeta. And honestly, if we're looking at this Woodbine Oaks, Matt, Dixie Moon had clearly the better trip. Wonder Godot was squeezed back at the start, had the wider go, and was slowly but surely gaining on Dixie Moon for most of the stretch.
Yeah, that's one of the really fascinating things about this race. If you look at the past performances and you look at Wonder Godot in there, all you see are Grade 1 and Grade 2 races against the very, very best fillies in open company in our country. And you know, when I went through it, I said to myself, is this the time that Wonder Godot is finally going to break through and get a big victory? It seems like she's getting some class relief in here compared to a lot of the ones in the field who have been running in restricted company against just Canadian breds. On the one hand, I feel that way, and then on the other hand, you just see those second places piling up, including the Woodbine Oaks. I know there was a difference in the trips. Midnight Bazoo has already, had a lot of tough competitive races in here. She always seems to bounce back. So for me, she's a really big question mark. I'd love to see her get a victory.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, Matt, I think this is a good spot. She obviously likes Woodbine. She's done well before here. And that Woodbine Oaks, all things considered, you'd have to call her best in there. the 1.25 miles of the Queen's Plate should only help her, especially if we're comparing her to the other two favorites. It seems like a 1.25 miles would suit her not only in running style, but she should be able to handle the distance with those hard races at 2 turns under the book. Don't forget last year at the Demoiselle at 9 furlongs at Aqueduct, she just cantered away from the rest. And of the two fillies, we're talking Woodbine Oaks. I think she looks like the one that wants a 1.25 miles, a little bit more than Dixie Moon. Taking nothing away from Dixie Moon, obviously a nice filly. She did fail, though, in a couple of her toughest tests, which came on the turf. Not sure if she's better on turf or the synthetic surface at Woodbine, but Dixie Moon clearly has done well over this synthetic surface. So certainly a threat. I think she'll be vying for third choice in here, though, because I think Wonder Godot is the filly from the Woodbine Oaks that most will prefer, and including myself. It would be nice to see her breakthrough. What a breakthrough this would be. First win of the year after 6 tough defeats to win it in the Queen's Plate, but certainly Wonder Godot has a big shot. Matt, let's look at that plate trial, though, the other big race from June 9 at Woodbine. And there we had Telekinesis, who's been really talked about long before he ever ran. Stone Street runner for Mark Casse. Mark Casse wanted to buy this horse early on, and Stone Street got him, who's one of the many clients for Mark Casse. So Mark Casse ended up getting him in his barn. We've heard stories of his talent from before he ever ran, and he really hasn't disappointed. Impressive maiden win that he ran against good older horses only in his second start. Kind of like Justify, where he didn't begin his career until February of his 3-year-old year, but he's done a lot in 4 starts. Big second in the Lexington Stakes here in Kentucky when My Boy Jack just nipped him at the wire. And then the plate trial was kind of a facile victory over Rose's Vision and a few others that are running in the Queen's Plate.
Yes, certainly Telekinesis is a horse that has been highly regarded, was a big, about $450,000 weanling purpose, has been favored at the betting windows every time the horse has run. A lot of talent in there. Like you said when you were talking about Wonder Godot, I think I've got some questions about the 10 furlong distance in here with the horse, but the horse is a big talent for sure.
He's a big talent, Matt, and I really do wonder. He gives me the impression of a horse that we might not have seen the very best from. Now, often that never comes to fruition, and horses that look so talented never kind of go beyond a certain level. So Telekinesis, I think, is this is a turning point in his young career. 4 races in, he's a stakes winner. Like I said, My Boy Jack just got his measure in the Lexington Stakes. But if he's waiting to really pop, and the Queen's Plate was the spot that Mark Casse was kind of gearing him up for, we could see a big performance in here. Having said that, Matt, there is a fair amount of pace, 16 horses, and definitely no shortage of speed in here. Telekinesis and probably Dixie Moon as well are 2 that should be on or near the lead in here, which could set something up for a horse who comes from farther behind. One of the horses that I might want to look at a little bit, should be a real long shot, although maybe with the name he gets a little bit more play, is Ahead by a Century. And if you're familiar with Canadian rock music, of course, you know the Hip as they're known. So Ahead by a Century, named after that song, didn't run his best race when third in the plate trial, but I think he might be a 10 furlong horse. And then Rose's Vision, who made Telekinesis work in that plate trial, if he moves forward a little bit too, both of them should at least be considered here at 10 furlongs for the Queen's Plate.
Yeah, Brian, and as we went through our discussion of Telekinesis and Dixie Moon and Wonder Godot, we clearly have questions about all 3 of those horses, and when we're talking about a 16-horse field and the way that it's made up in the Queen's Plate, for me, this is a race where I'm going to be looking to play some horses that aren't those favorites. And I've got a couple that I also like in there, Brian. This is not typical kind of stuff that you hear from me on the show, but I like alternative route a little bit, who's 30-1 on the morning line for Al Stoll. I like the way he prepped this horse for the Queen's Plate. To me, it seems like Stoll has had his eye on this race for this horse all along. When he sent him to win a race on the artificial surface at Turfway Park. And then he ran on the turf at Arlington Park when the turf was just a complete bog, and as a draw a line through it race. I find that horse a little bit interesting at 31. I also like the Graham Motion runner Strike Me Down, Brian, as another one. I like Graham Motion when he's at big odds, and I think we'll get a good price on this one. Motion sent the horse up to Woodbine to break his maiden on the Tapetus surface, and then came back to Monmouth, where on the turf in the Tail of the Cat, this horse ran a good race and finished second. To me, this is a horse that is getting better. His speed figures have improved in every start, and I have a feeling that the Tapetus surface might be his best. So there's a couple long shots from me that I would like to play in the Queen's Plate.
All right, Matt. Well, let's start with Strike Me Down. Strike Me Down, of course, is a Sam Son homebred, and Sam Son has been a dominant force in Canadian racing and the Queen's Plate for a long time now. This is a son of Tappet out of a really, really nice mare named Strike Softly, who is a bit of a turf monster up in Canada. So this horse is bred to be a champion. Strike Me Down, unfortunately, Matt, Graham Motion and Ortiz coming in, I think that you're going to be a little disappointed with those odds. I have him more in the 4 to 5 to 1 range. I think he'll actually be vying for third choice with Dixie Moon in here. Having said that, I like him too. I like him a lot. I think a mile and a quarter should be up his alley. Although a little hard to tell from his last race because he was bottled up a little bit in that Tail of the Cat stakes at Monmouth Park last time. And he made a real burst of speed to look like a sure winner as the field turned for home, and then was run down late. Having said that, they were way ahead of the rest. So it was still an interesting looking race. And obviously a horse of talent. He's done well at Woodbine before. He was second in his second race of his life to Dixie Moon on the Tapetus. So Strike Me Down, certainly a horse to watch out for. I'm not as quite with you on alternative route. I think Ahead by a Century is my bomb in here over alternative route, but I could certainly see why you like him a little bit. I just worry that those Rushaway and Arlington Classic races were quite a bit cheaper than maybe even normally they are. So I don't know what he beat in there, but an interesting horse to say the least. Matt, it's a very tough race to pick, actually. I think Telekinesis probably is favored slightly over Wonder Godot. If I had to pick a horse who wins this race by daylight, I think Telekinesis might be ready to really throw in a big one. If I had to pick a horse most likely to run a good race and to be in the money, it's probably Wonder Godot, as consistent and classy as she is, and I think 10 Furlongs again helps her. But if I had to pick just a winner, I think the Graham Motion horse makes a lot of sense for everything you mentioned. 10 Furlongs, the surface, and clearly he's building up to this race with those two races he's run this year. So if I had to pick a winner, I'm going to say Strike Me Down. 10 to 1 on the morning line will not happen, though.
Yeah, that probably makes sense, but still keeping in mind that it is a 16-horse field, and if you want to use a horse like Strike Me Down in the exactas or in the trifectas with some of the other horses that we've mentioned, your bomb, my bomb, and some of the more favorite horses, that'll help you get some better value.
Absolutely, and 5 to 1 in a 16-horse race, Matt is exactly right. That's not bad, especially if you can hook them up. So that's the Queen's Plate. Matt, who is your top pick? You like Strike Me Down as a top pick, or you think one of the favorites is still the one to beat?
Yeah, no, I taking in everything we said, I can't pick out one of the three favorites as a top choice. I would go with Strike Me Down.
Strike Me Down, okay. And again, don't be surprised if Strike Me Down is even lower than Dixie Moon. I think Dixie Moon might offer some value, although she's not one of my top three in here, because I think she will be let go a little bit off that Woodbine Oaks win. All right, Matt, that's the Queen's Plate. Let's move on to another big race down in the United States. Matt, there were some big 3-year-old fillies up north running Saturday in the Queen's Plate, but there was also some good 3-year-old fillies running right here in the United States on Saturday. We have the Mother Goose. The Mother Goose, mile 16th over the main track at Belmont Park on Saturday, Matt. I tell you what, there is no Monomoy Girl in here. And like we mentioned, there's some good ones up in Canada, but there are some very good ones in the Mother Goose. And I think most eyes will be on a pair of fillies, one from California and the other from the Cassie Barn. Road to Victory, undefeated in 3 starts. Midnight Bisou making her first start since 3rd in the Kentucky Oaks, when she was actually the favorite over Monomoy Girl, and now she comes in for different connections.
Yeah, Brian. I guess no longer a California horse. Of course, she did start her campaign this year with three big wins out in California. And Horse Center fans know Brian and I have both liked this horse a great deal during the early stages of this year. But since then, since the Kentucky Oaks, she's been transferred from the barn of Bill Spar to the barn of Steve Asmussen, and has been training at Belmont Park, and will make her first start for Asmussen in the Mother Goose, which is a 1-turn mile and a 16th race.
Absolutely, and I think a mile and a 16th 1-turn probably fits Midnight Bisou. I'm not saying as she matures, she won't be a top-notch 2-turn horse as well, but a mile 16th at 1-turn, we know Midnight Bisou is going to like it, Matt, and obviously a good sign that Big Money Mike Smith is sticking with her, going there to ride. We don't think everything went her way in the Kentucky Oaks. Not that she was best over Monomoy Girl by any stretch, but we remember those races that she ran in California. You're right, this is a filly I've liked for a while now, before she even broke her maiden, and I remember how good she looked out in California. I think this race is going to set up very well for her. She's maybe the favorite. I guess she's a slight favorite, but the undefeated filly from the Cassie Barn has a lot to like, and a very unusual way of coming to the Mother Goose, Matt. She broke her maiden on turf in Canada last year. Then she came down to Churchill Downs and ran a huge race to win a hard-fought photo over Monomoy Girl. That means she's the only horse to ever beat Monomoy Girl, of course, the star 3-year-old filly of this country this year. And Road to Victory came back after a long layoff to impressively win a turf sprint up in Woodbine, 6.5 furlongs, the Alley Wow Stakes, Matt, and it looked like a very nice return.
Yeah, like you said, Brian, it has been a very interesting campaign that Road to Victory has put together in her 3 career wins, with the 2 starts sandwiching around that upset victory in the Goldenrod over Monomoy Girl. Clearly a talented, very talented horse, facing maybe a little bit horse with a little bit more experience and seasoning at a higher level than Midnight Bisou. And it's interesting to think about what Mark Casse had in mind, sending the horse up to Woodbine for the 6 furlong turf sprint. Maybe that's the only thing that was available to get the horse in shape, but I know he has said that she's doing really well. She has been training at Belmont, likes the surface there, so it's should be an interesting matchup. They seem to be the big 2 in the race, but there are others in there.
There are others in there, Matt, and it's not going to be a big field by any means. Probably there'll be a scratch and we'll be down to 6, but with a matchup like Midnight Bisou and Road to Victory, we certainly have a lot to be excited about in this year's Mother Goose. Road to Victory, who knows how good she might be. I mean, she's really done everything asked, and she got a really sharp prep in for the Mother Goose. But as you alluded to, Midnight Bassoon now with Steve Asmussen's barn, I still like her a lot. I'm not telling you anything that you can't find by looking at the odds board on Saturday, but I'm sticking with Midnight Bassoon here, probably as the favorite over Road to Victory. But I think it's just a really good race to watch. And let's start talking about some of those other fillies because, there are some fillies that may be quite good still in here. Coach Roxford trainer Dale Romans is the Gulfstream Park Oaks winner. Finished in the middle of the pack in the Kentucky Oaks. Came back with a decent second in the Black Eyed Susan. You got My Miss Lily, who probably you can draw a line through her Kentucky Oaks experience where she ran 11th, but she was the Gazelle winner just 2 starts back. And maybe the most interesting of all is Most Smart. 2 easy wins, Matt. She just won for fun for Daylight in a maiden allowance race. We have no idea if she can handle this kind of pressure, but obviously Todd Pletcher has a talented filly in Most Smart.
Yeah, Most Smart is certainly a wild card in here. Like you said, Brian, 2 big wins, and we mean by big numbers of lengths in both of those races. So how good this one is, well, we'll find out. This is certainly a big test, stepping up to Grade 2 company and trying to battle horses like Road to Victory and a proven, very classy horse like Midnight Bassoon. But I think, like you, Brian, I got to go with Midnight Bassoon. Steve Asmussen, he knows how to get talented fillies ready for big races. So even though sometimes you hate to see a horse change hands from the original trainer who had done such good things with the horse, they moved the horse to Asmussen for the better summer racing out at Belmont and Saratoga. So I guess you can understand it, but Asmussen certainly knows how to handle these kind of talented fillies.
That's right, Matt. It reminds me a little bit of 9 years ago. I should say also that Midnight Bassoon has a few more owners in the mix now than she did just a short time ago when last she raced for sure. So Midnight Bassoon has the hopes of a large group of owners now for Steve Asmussen. Steve Asmussen, the second trainer of a 3-year-old filly coming to the Mother Goose. Let me think. That's been about 9 years since we saw Rachel Alexandra off her Preakness win come to the Mother Goose. She ran 146 and change and won by about 20 lengths, folks. We're not predicting that for Midnight Bassoon, but unfortunately, we're giving you the favorite exact in here, Midnight Bassoon, over the undefeated Road to Victory. And again, Road to Victory could be a good one. Should be a fun race. Matt, it was a little before my time, just barely actually, because when I was a youngster, this is the horse that I always heard about. But it was 50 years ago when Dr. Fager made his one and only start on turf. It was the United Nations Handicap. Back then, of course, that was run at Atlantic City Racecourse, and the good doctor gave away gobs of weight, and he had pressure the whole way. Looked like he was beaten at the head of the stretch, but of course he valiantly held on to win the UN of 1968, giving him Horse of the Year. Well, many things gave him Horse of the Year, older male, and Sprinter of the Year, but it also added Turf Champion to that unbelievable year from the good doctor, Dr. Fager. 50 years ago, 1968, there are no Dr. Fagers in this year's edition of the United Nations Handicap, Matt.
That's true, Brian. Well, there aren't too many Dr. Fagers out there ever in those 50 years since that amazing horse ran, Brian. But the United Nations has since moved to Monmouth Park, and the United Nations has continued to be an important race for the older males on the turf. Like you said, no Dr. Fager, but over the last few years, some very big names in that division have won the United Nations and gone on to win the Eclipse Award in that division. Horses like World Approval, horses like one of my favorites in recent years, Main Sequence, and then, of course, throw in Big Blue Kitten, who won the race twice. It's a race that has had a lot of quality. I don't know. This year, there's a field of 9 expected in the United Nations. I don't think at this point there are even any of those kind of names like World Approval or Main Sequence or Big Blue Kitten in here. But the United Nations is a great race. And, folks, I'm just going to put in a little plug, Brian, for Monmouth Park, a track that you and I in our New Jersey Times have enjoyed going. There's good things happening at Monmouth Park right now, folks. They're bundling races in the cards. The crowds have been good. The handle is up. And, of course, there's sports betting at Monmouth Park also. So you can go to the track at the Jersey Shore, enjoy some great racing, and if you want to, you can throw a few dollars down on some sports. You can watch the World Cup, put in a World Cup bet. They've got monitors showing those races. And interestingly, thus far, in the first 2-3 weeks of sports betting, the sports betting has done nothing to take away from the handle at Monmouth Park, and attendance is up. So it's an interesting thing, folks. Go out to Monmouth Park, enjoy a beautiful day near the Jersey Shore for great racing, sports betting. But let's talk a little bit more about the United Nations, where Mr. Turf Racing trainer Chad Brown has 4 horses entered.
All good news, Matt. I like to see the good news coming from Monmouth Park. They've been looking for sports betting for a while. After the show is over, I might have a few spot plays on the upcoming Wimbledon tournament, the little tournament they have in England, for you to play for me. So we'll talk later. But as far as the United Nations, yeah, Chad Brown comes in 4 deep. It's hard for me to look past the Chad Brown 4 in here. You know, there are no world beaters in here yet, but on the other hand, I could easily see one of these horses, one of these 9 horses that are in the United Nations, becoming one of the real big players a mile and a half on turf in America. It's still a division that is up for grabs, really, and for the taking. And there are some horses in here who I could see move forward with a nice win in the United Nations and become one of the top distance turf horses in America. I also see a race where, yeah, Chad Brown dominates with 4 and probably a few of the favorites. But on the other hand, I couldn't throw out any of the other horses that are not amongst the Chad Brown 4. So an interesting field, and maybe a field where you could get some money. But let's start with Chad Brown. And I guess we should start with Money Multiplier, a horse who I've always liked, but hasn't quite lived up to what I wanted from a few years ago. He was second to World Approval in the UN a couple years ago. He's also won the Monmouth Stakes a couple of times, Matt. So obviously, Money Multiplier is son of Looking at Lucky. This is a turf course that he likes.
Yes, he certainly does. He's turned in some of his best performances there, and he's got Jersey Joe Bravo up in the irons, who has ruled Monmouth Park for so many years and is one of the most underrated turf riders in the country, in my opinion.
Good point, Matt. Joe Bravo on the grass, Joe Bravo at Monmouth Park. You always have to watch out for that. And he did win this race, a horse I had last year with some odds, Bigger Picture. Bigger Picture comes into this year's race with a little less form than he did last year. And Joe Bravo this time is on Money Multiplier. Having said what we said about Money Multiplier, I think he's the favorite, and I'd like to try to beat him. I'm not sure what kind of odds you're going to get on the other Brown horses, but all 3 are interesting, fantastic, should be out there early, and seems to be an improving sort. But the other two imports, Kirilov and Silver Wave, come out of a strong 1.25 mile allowance race at Belmont Park, and I think both are big threats in here to win for Chad Brown as well.
Yeah, Kirilov comes in there, and Irad Ortiz is coming over from New York to take the mount. That horse has been flashing some talent. I don't think he's quite lived up to what we all expect from Chad Brown, but he can't win every time. Horse ran well at Gulfstream Park, finished second in a Grade 1 race there over the winter, so the horse has some talent. There's also Silverware, and Rajiv Mirage is coming from New York to ride that one. This one's run a few times in the States since coming over from France, where he was a Group 1 winner there.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt. Is it Silver Wave or Silverware? I think it's Silver Wave. That's what I have in my notes.
Okay.
Well, let's go with Silver Wave. Silver Wave is extremely interesting. Again, maybe he's only the third preferred of the brown horses, but if you look at his French form, folks, he's the horse to beat in here. If he can come back to some of those big races he ran in France, he was running against top-notch European grass horses at the distance and doing quite well. 2 races in America, like Matt said, they're not great. They're not bad either. If he can improve a little bit and he likes the added distance again, Silver Wave, I think, has a big shot in here. But if we just look at this year's form, I think Krylov is the horse to beat. Krylov, I'm going to throw out that really wet turf we had at Churchill Downs, but his other races look good enough to get the job done in here. So Brown. Having said that, at One Go All Go, Speed has really proven to be a nice distance turf horse this year. Vittori Kim, another import, is coming off a strong win at Churchill Downs. Oscar Nominated is a horse we've known about for years, likes the distance and is rounding into form. Bigger picture, I don't like his form of late as much, but he did win this race last year. And even Shug's horse, Profiteer, seems to be an improving horse who certainly could step up into this class.
It's a good group of horses, and trainers like Mike Maker and Shug and Scooter Dickey, they know how to get horses ready for big races on the turf.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to get one of the imports from Chad Brown into the exact Krylov and Silver Wave, and maybe try a little bit of a horse who can rally into the picture as well, either Vittori Kim or Oscar Nominated, hoping that Money Multiplier is the favorite. His Monmouth turf record scares me a bit, but I'm going to try to beat him this time in this edition of the UN. As always, I want to thank the best contest site out there, Derby Wars, for their continued sponsorship of us here on Horse Center. I'd also remind you, please subscribe to our YouTube channel right here on Horse Racing Nation. Matt, we're getting closer with our venture, Derby Day Racing. The two-year-old partnership is gaining some more interest here of late, and I think we're very close to buying our first 2-year-old in the next week or so. So that's exciting. What do you think, sir?
That certainly is an exciting prospect. I can't wait to have our partners start enjoying a horse and going to the stables and getting ready to see them out on the track in the Derby Day Racing silks. As always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Thank you to Brett. Thank you to our trainer at Derby Day Racing, Buff Bradley, who will be getting those horses to the starting gate with the best chance to win, those future horses that are coming soon. Hey, Matt, how about we do one of our trail-off races? I think they're the best 2 male turf horses in the world. Cracksman certainly had that title, but he was beaten in the Prince of Wales' stakes at Ascot last week. And the horse who beat him, Poet's Word, is getting better and better, and this was an impressive win.
Poet's Word is almost level with him though under James Doyle and has just got into the lead. It's Poet's Word. Is this the one for Sir Michael Stout? Cracksman in second place. He can't go with Poet's Word, and it's Poet's Word and James Doyle. Cracksman in second place trying hard, but Poet's Word will lower his colours and make history for Sir Michael Stout by winning the Prince of Wales' stakes. Poet's Word has beaten Cracksman. Hawkbill back.